Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, Solving the Hidden Asset Challenge, How Facilities Teams Can Retain Knowledge and Streamline Operations. I'm Jennifer Getz, the Editorial Director of Facility Executive Magazine, and this webinar is presented by ARC Facilities. Before we get started, I'll cover a few housekeeping items. There will be a question and answer segment at the end of the presentation today. Please find the question box in the dashboard on your screen. This is where you can submit questions for our speaker today. If at any time you experience a technical difficulty, please send us a message via that question section and someone on our team will answer you privately. Now, without further ado, I'm happy to introduce your speaker for today. David Trask, National Director for ARC Facilities, is a keynote speaker, host of the Facility Voices podcast, author, and thought leader in the facilities management industry. David focuses on helping hospitals, universities, K-12 districts, and other organizations leverage innovative technology to drive efficiency in the facilities management industry through thought leadership and advocacy. David is outspoken about the urgent need to minimize the impacts of facility team retirements through seamless and comprehensive succession planning. David, thank you so much for joining us today.
Hey, thank you so much. And thank you everybody for joining us today. We're going to jump right in and share a lot of the best practices that I've seen and heard from around the country. I travel virtually every week meeting with your peers in the facility space, and I hear some good, some bad, and some best practices that people are doing. And I'm going to share a lot of that today and provide some of those insights. But what we're going to really touch on first here is the value of keeping vital information with buildings and not with individual people on your team. And think about that. I challenge you to think about the people on your team that know where everything is. That you got to change that process. And we'll talk a little bit about that here in a minute. But also the importance of accessing that stuff in the field to increase your response times, literally in the field. You're on a roof, you're in a mechanical room, you go from building to building, never having to go back and try and track down the information to do their jobs. They're in the field, they're on the move. So accessing that in the field. Also, methods for maximizing that expected life expectancy for your critical assets, but not just those critical things, all the supporting components of that, and being able to access that stuff and also do more PMs, get more out of your team's day. And then also how to leverage some of those technologies and utilize those modern tools. You know, I was at a conference just this week and I asked for a show of hands who's used ChatGPT in the last year. And about 3/4 of the room raised their hands. I said, keep your hand in the air if you used it 5 years ago. And almost everybody put their hand down. That's how fast technology is changing, and it's changing in our daily lives, but it's also changing in our lives in facilities. So let's jump right the heck in. So what do you consider an asset? So think about what's in your database. Is it just the mechanicals, or does it also include all your electrical panels, your plumbing, all your elevators, lighting, all the other supporting stuff that helps manage and keep your building functioning on a regular basis? You can see some of the things here, but also solar. What about your drawings for the buildings? That's an asset. You use that all the time. You use that for projects. You use that to track lines. You use that to find the things in your building. But also those other things, like you see here, exit signs, fire extinguishers, all the emergency stuff. So really think about that type of stuff that's in your database, and what do you and your organization consider an asset? Is it just the mechanicals, or is it a whole bunch of other stuff? But the other challenge is in almost every site. I don't care if it's a hospital, an airport, an office building, it doesn't matter, or a school, stuff's all over the place. All right. It's always tucked away. It's hidden in some different places, but that includes your mechanicals. That includes all your emergency stuff. That includes those electrical panels that are tucked away behind that door, or piping, gas, water, air. Where is all that stuff? And how are you tracking where that stuff is? But I refer to this as the kind of the maze. I was actually at an airport and I was walking through, and this is the extreme of what I call the maze. It's where is all the stuff? How do you even get there? Well, in this instance, I had to go through multiple levels of TSA to get to certain areas of a building. Some of it was badge access. Some of it, they weren't even allowed to escort me through the facility, meaning I couldn't, even with an escort, go through a door or go to certain areas, not through that door, but maybe there was another door we could get at. And also being able to see those signs and have that point out where I can go, where I can't go with somebody I'm escorting. But what was crazy is there were areas where I could go through a door on the third floor, okay, to get to another door I've got to go through. And then I turn back around, and the door that I just came through has a sign on it saying I'm not allowed to go back through that door. I mean, that's the maze. Okay. Now, again, that's the extreme, but also think about, how do you access if you're in a hospital? Do you go through a mechanical room to find an electrical room? Okay. The reason I'm talking about this is, what about the new guy, the new person who just started at your organization? It's a maze for them to try and figure it out. The bigger the building, the more of those secret squirrel ways, I call them, to get to the stuff, to do their job, to keep your building functioning. The other challenge is, think about all the different types of things you've got. Now, let's use water as an example. You may have domestic hot water, domestic cold water, chilled water, supply and return, hot water, supply and return, low temp hot water, or others things, steam. Okay. All the different things that you've got in your building, and all those different valves that are running all throughout your building, right? Where are they? How are you documenting those? Because if a pipe blows out, does the next person who's up in your site on third shift know where that isolation valve is, or where's that served from, or what are the rooms and areas that valve services or that line services? So again, I challenge you to think about all those different things that are within your building, and where is it? The other challenge is, it's that hidden stuff. Okay. This is an example. I walked into this room, and the guy that you see with the iPad there, he was the brand new guy. He'd only been there for a couple of weeks, and he walks into this riser room, right? And he didn't know how to drain it. He had no idea. They've got two different kinds in here too. They've got manual, they got a pneumatic, which is the air compressor side, but he's the new guy. No one told him how to do this. No one told him where this room even was. The challenge was, he spent 2 hours trying to figure out, do I turn this knob, and do I do this? And he's walking through this with a guy on the phone who'd been there for 20 years, okay, who's at home trying to figure out how to do this. Well, when we were documenting, I said, well, you know what? Why don't we put the location on a floor plan? And I was showing him how he's easy, he could do that on his iPad. And then I said, why don't we record a little video? Okay, so the next person that they hire doesn't have to go through the same thing that you just did. Try and remember all of that stuff, because at the time they had no way of documenting that. Well, again, think about all the other stuff in your sites. Think about the unique things in your site that, man, I wish I could record a little video or record something so that the next person up on my team who has to go service that thing or has to shut that thing down knows how to do it, and they're not calling me or calling that one guy or gal on your team, like I mentioned earlier, who knows where everything is. It's all about documenting that hidden stuff when you find it. The other challenge is, again, panels. I talk about this all the time in different conferences that I speak at, and I always say the panels are all over the place. Okay. And in this instance, I was doing a site walk with somebody, and I have a little scratch pad that I carried around with me, a little piece of paper I pull out of my pocket. And every time they said, I didn't know that was there, I put a little tick mark. Okay. The first day we had 36. First day. Okay. He was the electrician who had been there for 30 years. So we had that many panels that guy didn't know where they were. Well, the expectation is that the new guy would know where they are. Well, if he didn't, there's absolutely no way that the other guy did. And you see that photo in the upper left there. Okay. That's a little staircase that goes up that was behind a restaurant to get up to that room that you see with those panels in the bottom. Okay. That's the room. He didn't even know that existed. He never had to go up there. Okay. All that time, he had never had to go up there. That's crazy. Well, also, he didn't know that there was a panel and all the IDF closets are all over the place. Again, this is the extreme. Okay. But again, think about it. How many of those hidden things, even panels, are all over the place? And I'll tell you what's funny is I oftentimes see that custodial knows where a lot of this stuff is, even more so than some of the electricians, because they're in those rooms, in all of those rooms every day, every week. So they see that stuff. Okay. But now they can document that stuff. And again, they're not all stuck in somebody's head, so that your expectation should never be that they should just remember where all that stuff is, because that's an impossible ask. The other challenge is, again, it's that stuff that's been covered up. This is, again, a little bit of an extreme here, but there was a panel behind the wall in an airport store. So think about that. This is, again, I would never know that there was a door behind there. I had no idea. So now my head's on a swivel when I travel. I go into one of these stores and I'm looking for those little doorknobs, those little locks behind the snacks. Okay. But again, they're all over the place. They're also in restaurants, they're in kitchens. So if you've got a kitchen in your area, in one of your buildings, there's probably a panel close by, because it's running dishwashers, running ovens, running all the other stuff, microwaves. They're all over the place. Okay. And again, it's impossible for everybody just to remember where all that stuff is. So it's critical to document that. The other thing here, again, is mapping that stuff out. How are you able to document that? Are you walking around with a roll of drawings? You're walking around with electrical drawing? Do you have one line drawing that's got some of this stuff mapped out on it, or little Sharpie marks on it? But more importantly, everybody on your team is walking around with a phone in their pocket. They're all walking around with a smartphone. Okay. They should be able to click on it, open up the floor plan, and see the locations, and even sort. I want to see just the panels, or I want to see all the water shutoffs, or I want to see all the chilled water supply and returns. Be able to narrow that down and see it in just a couple of seconds. That's what the goal should be. But more importantly, the new person sees that day one. They start today. They know where all your equipment is. They know where all of your shutoffs are day one. They're not having to shadow that person on your team that's been there for 30 years for weeks or months or even a year, trying to figure out where stuff is and get to know your building. They have a fast forward or a cheat sheet here of knowing where your stuff is in your building day one. The day they start, they're turned on, they have access. That's what tools are available today. Okay. So the other challenge is being able to understand what I need to do. What do I need to take out in the field before I even get out there? All right. And having all that stuff documented for each item that's located and available on their phones. That's a big deal. So additional key information is, I hear this all the time. BMS systems are great, but, and I'm not knocking any system, okay, but they're not typically mapped out locations of stuff, including photos. They give you a general description of where it is. It's in this side of the building, it's in these rooms, or it services these rooms, but it doesn't tell you what ceiling tile to pop. Okay. Doesn't necessarily say that, oh yeah, we moved this and it now services these other rooms. But more importantly, visual. I'm a visual guy. I like to see, hey, here's a photo. I pop that ceiling tile, right? But also giving dedicated access to other people, not just your team. So think about those third-party vendors that you work with, giving those people access, giving your custodial teams access to certain things, and so that they can respond. Because keep in mind, you want the people who are on site to also have access to some of the stuff, so that you don't have to jump in your car and spend 40 minutes in traffic trying to get over to that building if your buildings are spread apart. Okay. But no matter what, you should be able to access this on your phone, middle of the night. You wake up, you get a phone call, roll out of bed, grab your phone, and be able to send that stuff to the people who are on site. We'll talk about that a little bit more in a minute. But the other challenge is, again, all that institutional knowledge. Remember, I challenged right at the beginning. Think about the team. Think about your team and the people on your team that know where everything is. And it's all up in their heads in most cases. Well, what do you do when they leave? Okay. You got a handful of people who know where everything is. They know what ceiling tile to pop. They know what lines run where, and they serve this particular area. Or they know where all those fire panels are. They know where all those backflows are, where all the mains are. Okay. I oftentimes see that people are burying some of the plates that are outside. They're in the flower beds or in their landscaping out in the around the building, and they're just covered up. They got mulch all over them. Okay. Well, they were there when you had that problem 5 years ago, and they remember, oh, it's in the corner of the building. Matter of fact, I think there's a shrub overgrowing it, like you see on the right-hand side. All right. That could be popping out of the ground, or it could be a plate in the ground. They just know where the stuff is. That's institutional knowledge. Well, they're aging out. A lot of folks are leaving. But this is the scenario I'm talking about here is everybody's got a guy named Bob or Bill or even a woman named Betty who's been there forever, right? The person's been there forever. Okay. They're the person that everybody calls when something goes sideways. Look at that gray in that guy's mustache, right? He's leaving. He may have a couple years left, right? What are you doing to capture that institutional knowledge before he walks? And I got news for you. When he walks, that stuff walks with him because there's only a certain amount of time that he's going to answer his phone, right? So you get it out of their heads and you get it so that everybody knows where everything is and everybody has to stop calling him or stop relying on just one or two people on your team to know where stuff is to do their job. So again, what do you do when he sits down in that chair in front of you and says, I'm retiring and the end of this year? Okay. The clock starts. Well, I got news for you. The clock started a long time ago. And it's not just the people who are retiring who are leaving and taking that institutional knowledge. It's also the people who've been with you for 5 years, 10 years that also know where that stuff is. And they left because they got another job. So again, I'm a firm believer the information should live with a building, not with a person, right? People leave. Not just, they're not leaving because they're mad. They're not leaving. Well, some cases they are, but again, most people are leaving because they retire or they got a better paying job, whatever the case may be. But it's all about the next person coming in because your building's still going to be there. So again, you want the information to live with the building, not with the person. So roughly 30% of facilities teams are in the retirement window of 5 years. So think about that. How many of your team are in that window of 5 years? They're going to be leaving in 5 years. So I challenge you to think this way. So again, how many are in that window? But more importantly, how much of your institutional knowledge is in their heads? And put a number to that. Think about it. If one school I talked to up in the Northeast told me that 40% of my team is in that retirement window of 5 years, but that represents 90% of my institutional knowledge. So what I hear is in 5 years, 90% of his institutional knowledge is walking out the door. What about the other 10%? What about the people coming in to replace them? So that urgency I was talking about is that clock's ticking. It's been ticking. Okay. So think about it from that perspective of what's going to happen or how much time do I have to get that institutional knowledge or what's my plan? Right. And again, we'll talk about that in some methods to do that here in just a few. So again, that staff retirements translates to the loss of institutional knowledge. They're leaving. It's not that they're always unhappy. They're leaving, they retired. They've been there for 20 years, 30 years, whatever. They earned it, right? But at the end of the day, too, it's getting that institutional knowledge out of their heads. I heard I was at a conference just this week and I heard an interesting perspective and I never really thought of it this way. He said, think about your most ornery or disgruntled person on your team. The person who holds those things to their vest like it's their power. I know my information is my knowledge. My knowledge is I know where everything is, so that's my power. They're forcing that person to work with the new people. Okay. And it's not to put them in a bad spot. It's to listen, they're here to help you. Okay. They're not here to take your job. They're here to help us be able to get that information out of your head before you retire. And then we'll help you. Obviously, we're gonna be happy when you're retired because you earned it. Okay. but that's also not your power. And I can't tell you how many people that I hear that sign consulting contracts after they leave because they need that person, or they just don't have the ability to backfill that role. And then they're like double dipping from their retirement, and now they got this consulting thing. Good for them, I guess, but that doesn't help you in your org. Okay. You need to capture that institutional knowledge and get your team all on the same page. So next person up, something fails, somebody's on vacation, next person up. And they're not having to guess and go out there and pop every single ceiling tile down a hallway, trying to remember where, or try and find where the lines are running. No, everybody should be on the same page. So also the challenge is, if you don't, when those people who are on your team who do know where everything is, something can go sideways quick. All right. You see all these photos of water all over the place. I always say water finds a way. Always. Water finds a way. That sealed floor doesn't mean the walls are sealed. All right. It will find a way. And I hear these kinds of horror stories all the time. I just heard one at the show that I was at that said they had a riser break that was in the middle core of the building on the sixth floor, went all the way to the third floor before they could shut it off. Right. So that's multiple floors going all the way down. That water's not just going straight down that chase, it's going this way, sideways, right? And impacts all those different floors because the guy didn't know where the isolation valves were. And again, you're not going to know where every single one of them is immediately, but they had no way to document that so that the next time this happens, or next time something like this happens, that the next person who's there would know where to go, would know where the isolation valves were. So again, ears perked up when I said, well, think differently. Document that stuff. You got to figure out where the stuff is, but have a method to document that stuff, because you can lose thousands, tens of thousands of dollars, if not millions of dollars, if it keeps running. Water finds a way, right? Water's like a gas pump. The longer it runs, more money. All right. And again, you want to be able to shut that stuff off as soon as possible, minimize that damage, but not also rely on a handful of people to know where those isolations are. So I always say, how are you getting the new team members up to speed? How long is it taking you to get those new people up and running? How long is it taking you to shadow somebody, or get those new people to shadow somebody in your org? I hear from 6 months to 18 months plus to get those new people up to speed. And what I keep hearing over and over again is it's just because they don't know where anything is. Okay, that's a big component. They don't know where anything is. And I always say, when people leave a building, they leave from one site, they're working at a hospital over here and they go to work for another hospital over there. If you've been in one hospital, you've been in one hospital. They don't know your building. Just because they come from the same industry, just because they come from the same type of building, they haven't been in your building. They don't know all those secret squirrel ways to get to things, or those things that are tucked behind stuff. Imagine them walking in the door day one and they just have a map of everything. That's what's possible today with technologies. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. But these are some of the ways that I would highly recommend that you take into consideration in capturing that institutional knowledge. Proactively start documenting stuff. All right. Every day that you wait is a day closer to that person's last day that knows where everything is. Scan and organize all your stuff. Get rid of all that paper. Okay. If you have paper, that means it's someplace where only a handful of people know where it is, or maybe it's in one building. That means you're asking your team to come out of the field to go to that room to find the stuff to do their job. They have a phone in their pocket. They should be able to access all that stuff in the field. Again, every time they're back and forth, jumping in the golf cart or jumping in the truck and having to go from building to building to try and find stuff, most guys that I talk to, they'll do that a few times, and then they just go out there and try and figure it out. It's a waste of their time, because remember, water's not going to wait for them to get back and forth. Now they have access to all that stuff quickly. It also has to be user friendly, easy. I always say, if it's not easy, they're not going to use it. Mobile, cannot stress that enough. Your team is mobile. Even the guy on your team who's the oldest person on your team, he's got a smartphone in his pocket, more than likely, right? It's not like it was 20 years ago. Everybody's got smartphones today, right? Also, maintaining that single source of truth. Everything, it's a central hub where everybody can access the stuff, but also hire those tech savvy employees. Most folks that are coming into the industry, they were born with a smartphone in their hand, right? But here's the stuff that's big, what that means by being able to capture that. Go from months of training to weeks. Okay. Give instant access to everyone who needs the information day one. Okay. Be able to turn them on and off. You can do that, right? But new team members can focus on those core competencies. You hire an electrician, let them be an electrician. A plumber, let them be a plumber. If they're working on PMs, now they don't have to guess where this stuff is. They just have a roadmap for where everything is, and they can start hitting the ground running day one. Say, the other thing too is go from the old way to the new way, right? The guy on the left there, back at his desk, he's out of the field trying to find stuff. He's hunting and pecking on that keyboard. Forgot his password. Can't find his password. Has to do the reset password. Now he can't log into his email. Okay, that was a real story. It happens because I haven't checked my email in a while, right? The guy on the right is in the field. He's walking around with an iPad. He can see every single thing in his building and every floor on the roof, in the mechanical rooms, in the basements. Okay. But look at that iPad he's got, all these little dots. He taps on those and he can see the thing he needs to see. He's looking for a heater up in the ceiling hanging. Okay. He can see the details about that heater. What is it? Make, model, serial number. He didn't have to grab the ladder, climb up there and try and find out what's the model on that thing. Right. But he can do this from his desk. He can do this from home. He can do this from another building and text it to the guy who's standing underneath that heater or underneath that fan coil unit, and even send him a picture. Where is it down the hallway in proximity to the doors? You can do all of that today. But assets are all over the place. Okay, we're talking about mechanical here. I'm showing mechanical here, but they're all over the place. But how accurate is that database that you've got? Okay, well, 20 to 40% of the stuff that is in asset database is on average, we see it's replaced, decommissioned, moved, or it's new, right? New stuff, just your teams run around like crazy. They're fixing stuff. They're replacing stuff. They're putting band-aids on stuff, trying to make sure they can keep your buildings running. But a lot of times that stuff just doesn't get documented. They wrote it down on that little piece of paper and it got thrown out. Or they just got pulled to another job. They went out there, put a band-aid on it, went to the next job. They forgot about it, right? Not their fault. They're busy, right? But being able to do the documentation of it while I'm standing next to the unit, okay, not having to run back to a desk someplace, open it up, try and remember my password and then update it, or send an email to somebody. Hey, I did this X, Y, and Z, or even handwriting a note and handing it to an admin that has to manually enter that and try to read their writing, right? No, they do it in the field while they're standing next to the thing that they just did. They just fixed. You can do that today. But this is what I oftentimes see, at 20 to 40%, it's just missing a bunch of stuff, right? Where is it? What is it? What manufacturer is it? What model is it? And they're out there hunting for this stuff. But this is what you want. You want it to be able to update that stuff in the field. They can go from this while I'm standing in front of a unit, I can put in the manufacturer, I can put in the model number, and I can see all that information to this. You can do that. Because what this is going to help you long term in your leadership role is to go out there and be able to have educated and make educated decisions on what needs to be replaced, what needs to be included in projects, what needs to move. This doesn't help you if you don't even know what's out there, right? You want a complete list. And again, it's not just a snapshot in time. This is constantly being updated by you and your team as you change stuff, as you swap stuff out. But do you know where it's all located? You know, remember I said there are a lot of systems out there that will tell you when it's time to go service something, when it's time to do a PM, but it doesn't really tell you where that stuff is located, especially not easy. And my team's not accessing that in the field. Where is that stuff from building to building? Again, if you're relying on them to just remember where everything is, those are points of failure, I call them. They're never going to be able to remember where everything is in your buildings. It's an impossible ask. But they're climbing ladders trying to find that stuff. They're popping ceiling tiles. They're going up from ladder to ladder. I took all these photos that you see in this whole thing, right? This whole deck, right? And it's they're climbing ladders. They're trying to figure out where stuff is, but they're also servicing some stuff that looks like this, right? You may not have much of this. You may have some of this. You may have a lot of this. I don't know, but they're trying to make sure that you've got equipment running as best you possibly can, right? And it's a mix of new and old. The other challenge is they're in the field, they're on the move, they're constantly going from job to job, building to building, fire after fire, putting them out, trying to maintain your building and keep everything functioning at peak performance. But I challenge you to think of it this way. They're going like wildfire a lot. They're running from, fire to fire, trying to put all this stuff out. They get more time back if they don't have to keep running back and forth from the field to try and find the stuff to do their job. We're talking about instant access to that information. Instant. Okay. I'm on a roof. I can pull my phone out of my pocket. I'm in a mechanical room. I'm up on a lift. That's me in that picture in the upper left-hand corner there. I'm up on a lift. This is in a football stadium. I'm on a lift documenting that heater, right? Those things there are hundreds of those all over the stadium. It's an NFL stadium, right? All of these are all over the place, right? And we're trying to document where that stuff is, so I don't have to go find that lift to get up there. No, I can find the information on my phone from home, from my office, from my car, wherever the heck I'm at. Before I even go up there, I know what filter I got to grab. I know what belts I got to grab. I know what manufacturer I've got to call, or I know what parts I need. You can do that today in the field. So what steps should you take to keep your asset database up to date and accessible? Your entire team should be able to access that stuff. So ditch the old way. Okay. I cannot stress this enough. How many people I've talked to that said they stopped letting their teams carry around these little notebooks. All right. They said, if it's in that notebook, it's not in our system. Right. Well, that's the challenge. They're in the field. They have that phone in their pocket, giving them the ability to pull that phone out of their pocket, grab that iPad, take a picture of it, hit save, and everybody's looking at it. What I just did, they see it immediately. Again, it's a modern approach to have instant access to that information. Well, let's talk about it from a little bit different perspective too. Think about AI. All right. Again, I asked this earlier about using even Chat GPT, but imagine this is coming quickly. Imagine your team walks into this room, they see that water heater, and they get a little pop-up notice that says, you know what, you were just here, or John was just here, and he actually worked on this thing 3 weeks ago. And matter of fact, he found a video that said there's a problem with these, or you know what, here's a trick on how to fix that thing. Now, I'm showing a water heater here, but that could be an air handler, that could be an exhaust fan, that could be whatever. But giving you some tips, not telling you to do something, but say, hey, this is some things you might think about, because other people have been looking up this kind of stuff too. That's how AI is going to help your team. So it's going to be able to make some recommendations or some suggestions, not tell you that you got to do X, Y, or Z, but make some of those suggestions that you may not have thought about, right? Or you didn't even know existed. That's how it's going to help your team. In the field, though, being able to access that and say, you know what, gosh, I never knew this. They're using this other kind of fitting. I never tried that. Let me use this fitting. Boom, problem's fixed, problem solved. Never even knew that. That's some stuff that AI is going to be able to help with. But you got to adopt a proactive maintenance approach. So schedule those regular inspections, services, repairs to keep that running as efficiently as you possibly can too. But it'll help you prevent some of those unexpected breakdowns. I ask this all the time. How often is your team in that mechanical room, or how often is your team just stepping foot in that electrical room? And then, it's all over the board. But the more often you go in there and check, the more often you're going to be able to find stuff. You're walking down the hallway, there's an electrical room. Let me pop my head in there for a second, right? But it helps you be proactive to address some of those minor issues before they blow up. Okay, before they turn into something worse. And that's helps you reduce that wear and tear, minimizing that downtime. But more importantly, and most importantly, is improve equipment efficiency. Right? It's a big deal. You want to get as much life out of that unit as you possibly can. But by doing that regular maintenance, you're going to help to extend the useful lifespan of that equipment. And that's HVAC, plumbing, elevators, all of your critical stuff, but also the little stuff, right? That's running your building, all those jockey pumps, all those other things in your building that are keeping it so that it's running reliably, and also for the benefit of those building occupants. Okay, so imagine having all of your equipment. I showed shutoffs earlier, but imagine having all your equipment locations and details all in one spot. So photos, pictures of the labels, having a map showing where that stuff is, but also the ability to add stuff as I find stuff, record notes from you. Hey, we're having a problem with this, or, oh, you got to have this certain tool. So the next person who has to go in there, they see that. They see those details, having all my manuals linked to it, have a parts list linked to it, having all that stuff associated with that. But more importantly, being able to walk up to that thing, scan a QR code, and see that. That's what you can do today, right? You can access that stuff. As soon as you walk up to it, scan that QR code, boom, here's everything for that unit. That's how fast you can access the information. But even more importantly than that, think about it this way. When something goes sideways, okay, and it does, things happen, right? This is a scenario where that can help your team, even the new person on your team. This is a K through 12 district. They had a rooftop unit on a Saturday catch on fire. Fire department rolls up to the building. They call the 800 number or the on-call number. She rolls up to the building, had only been there for a couple of weeks, brand new person, HVAC tech, who's on call on a Saturday, rolls up the building a couple minutes later. They're not just going to put the fire out. It's live. It's hot. All right. It's got electric running to it. So she rolls up the building, sees the unit, pulls open her phone out of her pocket, says, okay, it's in this room, goes, unlocks the door, shows the fire department the photo of where the panel is, what breaker did trip or to turn off. They go in there, room's filled with smoke, goes in the back corner, kills the power, they put the fire out. Okay. Minutes of being able to do that. Minutes, not hours, minutes, being able to find that unit, kill the power, put out that fire, and now everything, the building's not burning down, right? Which could potentially happen. The fire department looks at her and says, how the heck did you do that? She says, oh, I've got all my shutoffs here. I've got all my panels, all my water, all my gas. It's all right here. He says, I wish every school had this. She goes, we have that on all of our schools. Okay. Can you do that with your building? All your buildings, not just one, all your buildings. One of the other conferences I was at in Vegas a couple of weeks ago, there was huge panel discussion. Room was filled, hundreds of people in there. Moderator says, I know this guy real well. He says, raise your hand if you have access to all your shutoffs on your phone. Handful of people raise their hand. That's a problem. All the shutoffs, we're talking about mechanical here, but also the shutoffs were impacted on this as well. We'll flip that around and say, how many of your assets, those mechanical equipment, your emergency equipment, all your fire extinguishers, all your strobes, all that stuff too, is all that mapped out and available on your phone? Okay. You could do that stuff today. Well, I'll show you kind of a few examples of that here in a few minutes, but what that means, what I'm talking about here is instant access to the stuff for your building, instant access to information for your building instantly, wherever you are. That's what a lot of folks are able to do today. And I'll show you what that can look like. So you got to progress. You got to move forward. As you're thinking about this, think about that process for capturing your institutional knowledge, getting everybody on the same page, right? Doing monthly meetings with your team, quarterly meetings with your team, weekly meetings with your team, almost a show and tell. Did you know? I hear that's awesome. Doing that, getting all the team together, and they spend 15 minutes. Did you know? Did you know that there's a shutoff valve that's in the corridor, southeast corner of the building, down the hallway next to room 101? Raise your hand if you knew that was there. One guy raises his hand. The guy who's been there for 20, 30 years. Okay. Everybody should know where that thing is. Or, hey, did you know that there's a unit on the roof here and it services this part of the building? And matter of fact, there's a little trick to it. Let me show you what that looks like. Everybody's on the same page. You got to think of a way to move forward. And that's a couple of examples, but you got to start. Every day that you're waiting is a day closer to those people who know where everything is last day. Okay. So also keeping up with the building changes. It's a moving target. Your buildings change, right? You do renovations. Things change in your buildings. Well, those changes are represented in usually a couple of different ways. One, it's paper, like you see here. Each one of those rolls right there is a new change to your building, right? But it could be this too. It could be the bottom left-hand corner. It's dumped on a share drive someplace. Well, who can access that stuff? Who knows where that stuff is? Do they have to come out of the field to access that? Why can't they access all your drawings on a roof, in a mechanical room? In the building is 5 miles from where this room is, where this stuff's housed, or from my desk. Again, instant access to the stuff wherever the heck I'm at. So start documenting where that equipment is located. Okay. If you notice here, the two guys, the one on the left, one in the center there, those are the guys that have been there forever. They've been there a long time. They're documenting this stuff. They're capturing all that information, right? The guy on the roof on the right-hand side, he's capturing information about these units so that the next guy can see it too. Got to start capturing that information. Okay, let's take a look at what that could look like. And let's think of it from the perspective of drawings. Okay, all my as-builts. Okay, I got a room full of them, or I got a share drive full of them. Accessing that stuff in the field. So it's simply pull your phone out of your pocket. Okay, then you see an iPad here, but same thing on a phone. You want to see the information building 4, tap building 4, right? Tap on the as-built map view, seeing every renovation in the building and see where it touched, in this case 2000. I tap on it, there's the drawing set. I do this on the roof. I do this in the field, in a mechanical room. I do it from a building I'm not even standing in, or I'm a building I'm standing in. I can see another building's drawings before I even jump in the car and head over there, right? That's what you can do today. The other way you can access information is think about all the mechanical equipment. Remember, I was talking about walking up to a unit, you scan that unit. Well, imagine you walk up to a generator, scan a QR code, and you can see all the information about this unit: make, model, serial number, the manual, like parts list, the warranty. You can see all that stuff. You can also search for all this stuff. Being able to do a search for a particular model number and find that model number in the database, but not just that database, be able to click on it and it shows it on a plan, on a floor plan, showing exactly what room I've got to go into to get to the other room where this thing lives, right? You can do that today. Same thing with shutoffs. Think about all your mains. Think about all your backflows. Think about all the stuff inside the building. But the stuff outside the building, all mapped out on a site plan. All the stuff in the building, all mapped out on a floor plan. In this case, you tap on a water icon and here's a backflow. All right. Everything. You can put in details. You can put in a little video, how to turn this off. Whatever details that are going to help your team be able to access that stuff in the field live. And you make a change to it, you delete the photo, delete the video, put in the new video, the new photo, put in the new information, hit save, and everybody on the team now sees that. That's what you want, everybody on the same page. So what we're talking about here too is also that AI and that machine learning. Remember, I was talking about that scenario. You walk up to a unit, you can see where that suggestions about some of the other things, or it even tells you, you know what, I was here or somebody else was here working on this thing. That's what AI is going to be able to do. But it also is going to tie back to other systems, tie back to that work order systems potentially. Click on a link and it takes you right to where that shows up in your CMMS. Okay. That's what everybody's starting to do and leverage technology. And it's a huge adrenaline shot to productivity. It's a big deal. And it's got to be simple. So working with other software, again, like I was talking about, making sure those asset ID numbers match up, making sure that all that information matches up from system to system, but all of it pointing to one spot. Access points. I call those jump off points. You can go to one spot and you can jump to other things, right? But it's all integrated, all in one spot, and you can link to other things, right? And again, going to your CMMS, but having all that stuff matching so you're not reinventing a wheel. I talked to one org and we actually went on site and we were mapping out some equipment and some shutoffs. I counted 5 different CMMS stickers. They'd switched CMMSs 5 times over the years. It's 5 different stickers, but they had no way to know, okay, well, I know I'm using this one today, this CMMS today, but all those other asset stickers, I was never able to cross-reference any of that stuff. Why not? You should be able to search for any of those and find the same piece of equipment. That's what you can do today. And AI will help with that. All right. And again, all in one spot. Everybody's looking at the same stuff. The overarching thing here that'll help you and your team is it's going to improve your productivity. Guys aren't having to come out of the field. They're not having to run around and try and find stuff to do their job, but also that risk mitigation. This is going to help you be able to respond faster and more intelligently because you know what you're getting into before you even get out there, right? And help minimize that downtime, help minimize that damage and get that thing shut off before that water's just, again, like that gas pump running. And that's like money. I look at a gas pump, longer runs, more money it's going to cost, right? But also capturing that institutional knowledge. Everybody should be on the same page. I call these kind of the 3 pillars for success. Everything in one spot, everything is accessible by your entire team and the third-party vendors that you work with. Think about all those contractors. Think about that third-party vendor that comes out and services those VAVs for you or those other devices in your building, giving them access. Everybody's on the same page. Everybody's looking at the same stuff. It's a big deal. And being able to do that quickly in the field is huge. So let's open it up to some questions.
Absolutely. Well, David, thank you so much for this informative presentation and for including some of your own photos there. I did not know that. They looked great. So to start off, I think I'm going to kick off the Q&A with a comment that came in. We had a riser line break on the 8th floor of my building, and it took us 2 hours to find the shutoff in the basement. This would have saved my building $30K and a bunch of headaches.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. I hear horror stories like that all the time. And it's funny when I travel to all these shows and I give presentations at these shows similar to what I did here. And I have so many people that come up to me and share their stories. And I call it therapy or couch time. No one ever asked what happened in their building. And the last show I was at, I was wearing a shirt that said, "What happened in your building this week?" And it was, I hear it all the time. And you know what? I think we all learn from each other, and I'm all about sharing those best practices. And I will tell you, you got to be proactive. That 30,000, did you say 30,000?
Yeah,
Oh
30,000.
my goodness. Yeah,
I know.
$30,000. Well, what if you could have got it shut off in 5 minutes? How much less damage would there have been, or what would that number have been if it would have been 10 minutes to shut it off? Would have been $1,000, $500, or zero because you were able to fix it yourself or remediate that, get that water out of there faster by yourself. I don't know what that number is, but it's different for everybody. But my goodness, water finds a way.
Yeah, Absolutely. Oh man. We have another question here, which I think also deals with water. A sprinkler head popped outside our CEO's office just yesterday, and we couldn't find the isolation valve. So we had to turn off the whole building. We've had a ton of renovations over the years, so I'm not even sure we have all the drawings. Can we add isolation valves as and runs as we find them?
Before I answer that question, hurry up and run into that guy's office with a blank check and just tell him to sign it. Because that's funny because that's a real world, I always say, yeah, you can absolutely map out isolation 100%. You need to because you don't want to just have to kill the water. In some instances, especially in healthcare, you can't turn the water off to the whole building. You need to know where those isolations are. But I challenge you to think of it this way too. That's interesting you brought that up with the CEO. It happened to the CEO or impacted the CEO. They're not facilities people. Okay. Typically, your C-suite has nothing to do with facilities. They don't know the first thing about operating equipment or your buildings. Okay. That's the perfect opportunity for you to go talk to them and say, listen, this is what we see often, or this also happened over at the other building, or whatever. This helps you to better educate your C-suite on different ways that you're managing the buildings and some of the challenges you run into, because this incident happened and now they're aware. So I really encourage you to have regular conversations with your leadership so that they do understand your job.
Wow, it's a situation like that actually presents an opportunity to have to start and spark that discussion.
100%.
Yeah, wow. Okay, another question we have here. I'm having trouble getting my older guys to share their knowledge with the newer guys. How have others handled this from your experience?
Sometimes it can be pulling teeth, but most of the time, I highly recommend you just got to make them do it. Okay. They I think with the older guys, what I see a lot, okay, and it's not every org, but I see this a lot with those people who are trying to hold their cards to their vest, so to speak, and not share that knowledge, is it's impossible for that guy to remember everything too. He can't. Okay. So when they start to recognize by documenting this stuff, they don't have to remember all that stuff. Okay. Because part of the frustration with jobs is, especially in facilities, is I don't know where everything is. So I'm spending all this time and I might even be getting yelled at because I'm not shutting it off, but I can't shut it off because I don't know where it is. So I'm spending all this time trying to trace stuff. I'm popping ceilings, I'm moving the ladders, and especially the guys that have been around for a long time, they're older. They don't want to be
Mhm.
dragging a ladder all up and down the hallway trying to find stuff. Once they start realizing, hey, this is a tool, this helps me in my day, then you start to see that barrier and those walls come down. And then they realize, listen, I don't have to remember. Or the guys will stop calling me when I'm on vacation.
It's funny. I just a comment just came through that says older managers need to be bribed.
Hey, whatever it takes, right? I hear they like lunch and they like donuts, right?
It's whatever works.
Whatever works. Find their love language, right?
Yes, absolutely. Another question we have here is I could see our design construction team and contractors using this a ton. Have other orgs pulled money from their project budgets to pay for this type of system/service?
I can only speak for ours, but yes, that is the biggest pool of funds traditionally in an organization, is that design construction side. And I've seen orgs that have pulled from that to pay for systems to upgrade for their team. Yeah, I encourage that because I think at the end of the day, this is to the benefit of the design construction side too. They have now full visibility to all the historical documentation for the building before they start that design construction project. They don't always get that, or they have to go dig and try and find drawings, and oh shoot, we don't have all the set. We're missing the whole electrical set out of that drawing set that I need. It's gone. Those as-built are, I oftentimes call them nearly built, okay, because they're not always right. But being able to give that side of the house access to all that information. And also, oftentimes I also see that they're siloed. So you'll have design construction's got their sets of drawings, and then you've got facilities having their sets of drawings over here. Well, design construction doesn't always see the changes facilities made in-house. They don't always get relayed back. So there, I call those blind spots. Now everybody's looking at the same stuff. That's the way it should be. So somebody
Mhm.
changes something, everybody sees that change.
Absolutely. Creates that single source of truth that you
100%.
mentioned earlier. Okay, another question we have here is we have a skeleton of an equipment list at best. Can your team build us a clean list?
Yeah, I've seen both extremes. I've seen lists that were actually pretty good. The vast majority of them are a mess, and I've done both. Where I've had our team when we go out in the field and we're capturing information, we're filling in some of the holes in existing lists. Others, they've reached out and said, you know what, we want to start over. We've had so many changes, we're missing so much stuff. Let's start over. I've had other orgs that have literally said, we have nothing. They hand us a set of keys, a card swipe for badge access, and say go. Okay, it's all over the board.
Yeah, I absolutely. I think we have time for one more question quickly. How much time would my team have to dedicate to this project?
Our system, I can only talk to our system. We do the lift. We do the heavy lifting. Like I said just a few minutes ago, we will send our team out. Whether you have enough staff to walk with us and show us things, we're going to find everything that we possibly can. Where our heads are on a swivel. We're looking up on the grid. We're looking in every mechanical room. We're opening up all the closets. Everything. We're going from room to room, site to site, building to building, floor to floor. We're getting up on the roof. We're popping ceiling tiles to as we're pointing. A guy walks with us and says, "Hey, there's something up here." We pop the ceiling grid. We take photos of it. We document it, and now it's there. Everybody can see that. I've had other orgs that have dedicated some people to walk with us. I always recommend the guy or gal on your team that knows, or the handful of people that know where most of the stuff is, have them walk with us. Okay. I want to capture that information from that person's head, but we're also going to capture the stuff that they don't remember or they don't see. And remember, I said earlier, I was doing a site walk with somebody who'd been with an org for 30 years, and he counted 36 electrical panels. He didn't know they were there. Okay. So we're looking for stuff as well while we're doing that site walk.
Awesome. That's wonderful. Well, David, thank you so much for
Oh,
being
my
here and
pleasure.
for answering these questions. It looks like we are out of time, but if we weren't able to address your questions today, the ARC facilities team will be reaching out to you privately. Thank you to all attendees for joining us today and for submitting questions. And special thank you to ARC Facilities for sponsoring this webinar. A recording from today's session will be made available on our magazine's website, facilityexecutive.com, and ARC Facilities will be sending a follow-up email with this recording as well. So thank you again, and I hope you have a wonderful afternoon.